Yeah, so Kirit and his wife married in 2016. A few years ago, she passed away. Next, so that's his daughter. She's in Pasadena City School. She's a teacher. And next, that's his son and his daughter, son and daughter-in-law and granddaughters. They are in Las Vegas. And Krita has a great family history. His grandfather went to Japan for doing some business, and his parents also got involved. At the age of 18 or so, he came to US to study accounting, and then he started working, and he went to some Bible study when he was in his college or during that season. And he also supported several people, especially bringing people to the Bible study and from different dorms or different college campuses. He has been faithfully doing. And he mentioned this is the first opportunity for him to speak in the Bible study or this time. And also it matches with his birthday, perfect 7 and 7. Is it 77? Birthday?
76.
6, okay. We were there a couple of years ago for his 75th.
Wow. Thanks for that introduction, John. Appreciate it. So finally, in chapter 7, God's justice is being revealed. So before I go into the chapter 7, I'm going to have a slight recap of the previous 6 chapters. And one of the things I know that as I was going through, and I had listed out my notes, and I said, it's something interesting, and I like the history part of it and what transpired. So I started kind of looking back and seeing the time frame of these events that happens in the book of Esther. So as you know, under King Jeconiah, he was the last king of Judah. And at that time, he was carried away into the Babylonian captivity through King Nebuchadnezzar. That happened, according to their sources, was about 605 BC. And then as I was reading through further, that the Babylonian Empire comes to an end around 539, so that's when the Persian Mede Empire starts under the Cyrus. And when he takes over, he grants the freedom to the Jews to go back to their homeland. So that's in 539 BC. And then King Ahasuerus, he comes into play around 486 BC. So it's almost another, several years. So if you look from about 540 to, 480, about another 40, about another 60 years. So when I was looking at that, that Esther was probably born either in Babylon or somewhere in Persia. So in chapter 1, it describes about what their reign was. It was all the way from India all the way to Ethiopia, roughly 127 provinces that were under the Persia Mede Empire. So he wanted to show off his wealth, so he puts on this grand festival, and he invites all the governors and the nobles and the dignitaries from the empire to come and show off as well. And that takes a period of about 180 days, so that lasts for about 6 months during the time. And then from there, during the last week, when they're having their grand feast, and everybody's happy and merry and all that, he asked this Queen Vashti to come out and show her off. And at that time she says, no, I'm not going to go. So king's very upset, and his advisors, etc. So with his advisors' suggestions, etc., they depose the queen, and then they decide that they need to find, and they put out a decree actually throughout their empire that women need to be obeyed to the rules and regulations that were described in the decree. And then later on, as now the king's anger is abated and he's kind of lonely, and the advisors all of a sudden realize that, we need to find a queen. So they send out to find a young lady, and Mordecai learns about it, and he says to Esther, and he gives her the guidance to follow, to be one of the nominees to be the queen. King is, when he sees all the different ladies, he sees Esther, he's very well pleased to see her, and he selects her to be his queen. So Esther becomes queen, and Mordecai somehow is also promoted. So he's sitting at the gate of the king's place, and right there he learns about a plot that king's servants are planning to assassinate the king. So he makes us aware to Esther. Esther in turn goes to the king, and she tells the king that, a couple of your servants, they're out here trying to assassinate you. And I got this message from Mordecai. And the king brings those two. He basically hangs those servants for trying to plot against him. As we keep on moving, some time passes by, and another character shows up at this time. His name's Haman. Somehow he's developed a relationship with the king, and king appoints him as the number 2 man in the empire. And he gives him the power that everybody needs to bow before Haman. Well, Mordecai being a Jew, he doesn't bow to Haman. He says, I'm not going to bow to him. So this makes Haman really angry, and he's filled with the wrath. And he's trying to figure out what to do. So he comes up with different types of plot, not to assassinate the king, but basically to destroy the Jewish people. So he goes before the king, and he doesn't tell them exactly who these people are. He just says they're people in the empire that are not accustomed to our laws, and if they don't adhere to our law, they need to be, destroyed. So king passes on that decree, not knowing. He just thinks that he's his top advisor, so he listens to Haman. When Mordecai finds out that Haman has come up with this plot, he goes to Esther, and he tells her that she needs to go see the king and let him know. Well, Esther already, has been informed, or I assume she has been informed, that you can't just walk into, king's court and start talking to him. we have to follow certain procedures. So she tells Mordecai that, hey, you know, I just can't go in there and unless she's summoned by the king. So Mordecai kind of emphasizes that, hey, you know, you need to really think about this because this is our men, women, children are all going to be wiped off if you don't do anything about it. So Esther takes time to think. She goes back to Mordecai and tells him to have the people there in the city fast for 3 days, you know, and pray for her. So at the end of 3 days, she gets the courage and she goes to the king and visits him. And when king sees her, he asks her, what is her petition? And she doesn't come out right away and tell him about that. She tells him that, you know, she'd like to invite the king and his number 2 guy, Haman, to a banquet. And king goes, all right, we'll go to your banquet. And Haman's very happy. He's joyful and that the queen has invited him to go to this banquet that she's prepared. She says, oh, he goes, oh, wow. He goes home, he tells his wife, his friends, and he says, hey, you know, I'm really happy that the queen's invited me along with the king to go there and for this special banquet that she has prepared. So Haman and the king go to the banquet the first day, and they enjoy the event, and the king asks Esther, what is her petition, you know, for this banquet that she's putting on? She's still very cautious and doesn't reveal it, and she says to the king, I'd like you and Haman to come the second day for this banquet. And the king says, all right, we will do that. Haman's pretty happy. And this is where God starts intervening, and which we covered briefly at our last meeting. The king on that first night, that as he goes to bed on the first night, second day, he can't sleep. So he asks the advisors to bring in the records from their historical data that they have. And they start reading. And as they read, they find out that few years ago, that there was a plot to assassinate the king, and Mordecai was the one who had revealed that plot. And king asks, so what did we do for Mordecai? You know, for doing this great thing and saving king's life. And the king goes, or the advisors go, we haven't done anything. So the king's, you know, thinking about what to do and where to go. So on the morning of that second day, Haman is being second in command. He walks into the king's palace and he starts talking with the king. And as king sees Haman coming, he goes, oh, here's Haman coming. And he said, hey, Haman, you know, I have a question, you know. Somebody who's done a very great things for the king, and how should king reward him or show his kindness and delight him? Haman, you know, not knowing what the king is asking him, he says to him, oh, well, you know, you need to put on your, have him dressed in the best garment, that you have, dress him in the king's best garment, put him on the finest horse, have him ride through this city, and have people bow down before him. He's thinking this is for him, and boy. And the king listens very patiently to Haman. And next thing king looks at him and says, "What a great idea, Haman. Now go out and do that to Mordecai and make sure you do everything you just said." And boy, all of a sudden things have taken turn around in his life. And he is sad, he is hurt, he's all of a sudden devastated. And he has to put Mordecai on the horse, dress him excellently, and have him go through the city. And he goes home and he shares this news with his wife and his friends and tells them about it and says, "What are we going to do now?" And his wife and his friend says, "Well, you know what? Your life's going to turn around." And he is really sad because he doesn't know what to do. I skipped one of the parts here, but I'm going to kind of go back and just reiterate that. During that first day also, when he was really happy about being invited, and he was thinking about how to take care of Haman, his wife and the friends that he had, they were the ones who suggested to him to build the gallows and to hang Mordecai. So he was still thinking about, getting rewarded by the king and hang Mordecai. Now, all of a sudden, he comes home and his wife and his friends say, "Hey, you know what? You're done as far as, trying to get into any kind of leadership or anything." So now comes we're going to go into chapter 7. And this is where Esther is going to speak. The truth comes out from Esther. So this is at the end of the second day when Haman had paraded Mordecai throughout the city, and he comes home and he's talking to his wife and friends and everything. The king's army comes to Haman's house and says, "Hey, you ready to go to the banquet for the second day?" And they take him and the king to go to Esther's banquet the second day. So Esther is sitting, king and Haman walk in, and they talk to her, and king says to Esther again, "What has been troubling you all this time? Reveal this, or can you tell me what has been bothering you all, and you've put on this banquet and invited us." So very patiently, she speaks with grace, and she's appealing personally, and she reveals herself. First, she says that Haman's plot, and he's going to wipe off all the Jews, and she is also one of them. The king, at this stage, when he hears remarks, he walks away and he goes into the garden, because he's always had his top advisors tell him what to do, and he follows their guidelines. But now his top guy is being accused wiping out the queen. And so the king walks away. Meanwhile, Haman is beside himself, and he is begging for mercy from Esther. And so he is at her side or at her feet and really begging for mercy. And as he's doing this, King notices something differently. He realizes that the Haman, who has been his best advisor now, is this wicked person. And he sees him kind of not necessarily begging for mercy, but that he is possibly, violating the queen. And King's wrath all of a sudden turns against Haman. So he walks him back from the garden to the banquet room where they're having the banquet. As he walks in there, that Harbona, one of the servants who's there, he tells the king, look at those gallows out there by Haman's house. He was going to hang Mordecai over there. And King says, he looks at the servants and he said, take this Haman and hang him on those gallows. So Haman's power comes to an end. He is basically hanged. So in chapter 7, there's about 4 theological threads. One is, God's justice is certain, truth must be spoken, the gallows point to the cross, and God used ordinary people. So, it's just kind of recapping on God's justice. And I'm going to be kind of combining the application and closing thoughts, waiting on God's timing, speaking with wisdom and grace. Pride leads to destruction. Stand with God, not evil, in God sees and God acts. Okay. So, some of the thoughts that I had were, it says, don't plan without God, as God may upset the plans we have made without taking Him into account. We get ourselves into circumstances that were not shown by God. The only thing that will keep us from even the possibility of worrying is to bring God in as the greatest factor in all of our planning. Don't plan with a concern or an evil in mind. Love thinks of no evil. Love is not ignorant of the existence of evil, but it does not take into account his factor in planning. When we were apart from God, we did take evil into account in doing all of our planning with it in mind. And we tried to reason out all of our work from its standpoint. When you have worry results in sin, and we tend to think that anxiety and worry are simply an indication of how wise we are. Christ never worried and was never anxious. He says in John, let not your heart be troubled. God will not keep your heart from being troubled. It is a command. It says, let's not. A person's will is embodied into the action of the whole person. It says, I cannot give up my will. I must exercise it. Putting it into action. I must will to obey, and I must will to receive God's Spirit. When God gives me a vision of truth, there is never a question of what He will do, but only of what I will do. The Lord has been placing in front of each of us some big proposals and plans. The best thing to do is to remember what you did before when you were touched by God. Recall the moment when you were saved, or first recognized Jesus, or realized the truth. It was easy then to yield your allegiance to God. Also, immediately recall moments each time the Spirit of God brings some new proposals before you. Openly declare to Him that I will be faithful. Will to be faithful and give other people the credit for being faithful. The Christian life is a life characterized by a true and spontaneous creativity. Consequently, a disciple is subject to the same charge that was leveled against Jesus, the charge of inconsistency. But Christ was always consistent in His relationship with God. And as followers of Christ, we must be consistent in our relationship to the life of the Son of God in us, and not consistent to strict, unyielding doctrines. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
So thank you, Dave, for the great preparation. I think many of our brothers also tried to help him, and especially want to thank Abraham for also helping with his PowerPoint. Abraham woman continuously worked with him. And this is a time now, let's all gather.